The interior was a stark contrast to the brightness outside, the walls lined with dusty bookshelves that stretched up to the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across the floor. The scent of old paper and something faintly metallic filled the air, making him feel both aroused and uneasy. She led him up the stairs, her hand in his, and into a room that was barely lit by the flickering glow of candles. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled, as if waiting for them. Her kiss grew more urgent as they stumbled towards the bed, her hands roaming over his body, reacquainting themselves with every contour. The room spun around him, a whirlwind of desire and fear. He felt himself responding, his body acting on instinct as he pulled her closer, his hands finding keep running their way under her shirt, feeling the warmth of her skin. She moaned into his mouth, a sound that sent a bolt of electricity through his body, setting his nerves alight. Her hand traveled down to his boxers, and she began to stroke him gently, her touch sending waves of pleasure crashing through him. His hips bucked involuntarily, and she chuckled, a dark, seductive sound that sent shivers down his spine. "You're so eager," she murmured, her breath hot against his ear. "But I want you to remember this." "Steph, I can't," he gasped, his vision swimming. But she just pulled away with a knowing smile, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "Oh, you can, and you will," she purred, her voice a seductive purr that sent a thrill of both excitement and trepidation through him. "Meet me here tomorrow, same time. Don't be late." Her words hung in the air, a challenge that resonated deep within him. He was torn between the urge to stay and explore this new side of her and the fear that clung to him like a second skin. But the decision was made for him as she stepped back, her hand slipping from his cock, leaving him aching and unsure. "Steph, what's happening?" he managed to ask, his voice ragged with need. Her smile grew more mischievous. "You'll see," she said, her voice a seductive whisper that seemed to resonate through every cell in his body. "Just don't tell anyone, okay?" Ryan nodded, unable to find his voice. He watched as she sauntered out of the room, her hips swaying in a way that made his mouth go dry. He could hear her footsteps descending the stairs, each one echoing through the old house like a taunt. When the front door clicked shut, he was left alone in the candlelit room, his heart racing and his mind a whirlwind of confusion and lust. The next day, he found himself walking down the same street, his eyes glued to the time on his phone. He had told no one about the encounter, not even Jerry or Brighton. The secret felt heavy, a dark stone in his pocket that weighed him down with every step. His palms were sweaty, and his thoughts were consumed by the promise of another encounter with the girl who had once been his everything. As he approached the alley, a rustling in the bushes caught his attention. He froze, his heart racing, expecting to see the psycho from his nightmare. But instead, a familiar face emerged from the shadows, his Therian friend Jose. The half-man, half-wolf creature looked at him with a knowing glint in his eye. "You're going to see her again, aren't you? Keep running." Ryan swallowed hard, his hand still in his pocket, clutching the cold metal of the knife he had brought for protection. "How did you know?" "I can smell it on you, man," Jose said, his voice a low growl. His eyes flashed with understanding and a hint of concern. "You're all worked up, like a dog in heat." Ryan felt his face flush, and he quickly averted his gaze. "It's nothing, just stuff." But Jose wasn't buying it. He stepped closer, his nostrils flaring slightly. "You're going to her," he said, his voice a mix of curiosity and concern. "The girl from the woods." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know about that?" "I've got my ways," Jose said with a shrug, his canine features more pronounced than usual. His eyes searched Ryan's, and for a moment, Ryan felt as if his friend could see straight through to his soul. "Look, man, I know you're all mixed up right now, but you can't go into this blind. You need to be careful." Ryan nodded, his throat tight with a mix of excitement and fear. "I know," he murmured. "But I can't stay away." "Okay. But just remember, if things get weird, you call me," Jose said, his voice firm. "I've got your back, no matter what." Ryan nodded, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. "I will," he promised, his voice a little shakier than he'd liked. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. But for now, I've got to go. With a final look at Jose, he turned and headed down the alley, his heart racing with every step. The house loomed before him, a silent sentinel of secrets and desires. He pushed open the door, the creak echoing through the empty hallway. The candles were lit again, casting a warm, seductive glow over the dusty furniture. Ryan took a deep breath and climbed the stairs, his heart thundering in his chest. The anticipation was unbearable, his mind racing with thoughts of what might happen when he saw her again. He reached the room, the door ajar, and pushed it open, his eyes scanning the space. Jamie was there, lounging on the bed, dressed in nothing but a sheer negligee that left little to the imagination. Her eyes met his, and she beckoned him with a single crooked finger, a smirk playing on her lips. He stepped into the room, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet, the candlelight flickering shadows across her body. The air was thick with a scent that was both intoxicating and disturbing, like a mix of musk and something metallic, something that made his pulse race and his stomach churn. She patted the bed next to her, and he found himself moving closer, unable to resist her siren's call. His mind was a tumult of questions and doubt, but his body was a traitor, eager to feel her warmth against him. As he approached, she leaned back on her elbows, the fabric of the negligee slipping down to reveal the swell of her breasts. He swallowed hard, his eyes lingering on the sight before him. She was everything he remembered and more, a seductive vision that seemed to have stepped out of his darkest fantasies. But there was something off, something that didn't quite fit with the sweet, innocent girl he had once known. Ryan felt his legs give out as he sat down next to Stephanie, his eyes locked on the swell of her breasts, the peaks of her nipples just visible through the sheer fabric. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, trying to reconcile the girl he knew with the woman before him. "You're staring," she said, a knowing smile playing on her lips as she sat up. She took his hand and placed it on her thigh, her skin hot to the touch. Ryan's mind raced. This was insane. He didn't know what game she was playing, but he was in too deep to back out now. He felt a strange mix of fear and excitement as she leaned in, her breath hot against his ear. "Do you like what you see?" Her hand guided his to the hem of her negligee, and he felt the softness of her skin as he pushed the fabric up, revealing her nakedness. She was a vision of beauty and danger, a siren's call that he couldn't resist. His heart hammered in his chest as he took in the sight of her, all soft curves and sharp angles, a stark reminder of the woman she had become. But then, a sound pierced the haze of desire, a howl that was at once familiar and jarring. It echoed through the old house, a primal call that seemed to shake the very foundations. Ryan's eyes shot open, and he heard it again, Jerry's unmistakable laugh, followed by the sound of a door slamming shut. "Jerry," he called out, his voice hoarse with confusion. The room was still, the candles flickering with the sudden breeze from the open door. The scent of musk and metal grew stronger, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. "Jerry, is that you?" he shouted again, his voice echoing through the empty hallway. But there was no answer, only the fading echo of the howl and the sound of his own racing heart. Panic set in as he realized he wasn't alone, there was something else in the house with them. The psychopath from the woods had followed him here, and now they were both in danger. Ryan pushed Stephanie off of him and scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting around the room. The candles flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock his fear. "We have to go," he urged, tugging at her arm. "Someone's here." But when he looked back at the bed, she was gone. The sheets lay rumpled and empty, the candles casting an eerie glow across the room. The house was silent, save for the distant echo of his own frantic breathing. He felt a cold hand of dread clamp around his heart, squeezing tightly. "Steph," he called out, his voice shaking. The silence was suffocating, the air thick with the scent of fear and sex. He stumbled over to the window, peering out into the night. The street was empty, the only movement coming from the swaying branches of the trees, their shadows playing tricks on his eyes. He turned back to the room, his eyes scanning the floor for any sign of her, his heart racing faster with every passing second. Then, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. His blood ran cold, his grip tightening on the knife in his pocket. The door to the room creaked open, and the psycho from the woods stepped into the candlelit space, his eyes gleaming with a madness that was all too real. The man was tall and lanky, his eyes wild and his clothes dirty and torn. His grin was a twisted mockery of human expression, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too pointed to be natural. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and Ryan could see the veins pulsing beneath the surface, a stark keep running. Contrast to the inky blackness of his hair. The stench of rotting meat and earth filled the room, making Ryan's stomach churn. The psycho's eyes, though, were what truly terrified him. They were red, not with the passion of arousal or the heat of anger, but with a malevolent light that seemed to burn with a cold, deadly fire. Those eyes had haunted his dreams, and now they were staring at him with a hunger that was unmistakable. Ryan's instincts took over, and without a second thought, he yanked the knife from his pocket and lunged at the intruder. The psycho was fast, dodging his clumsy attack with an ease that was unnerving. But he was also unarmed, and Ryan had the advantage of surprise. With a roar of pure terror and rage, Ryan launched himself out of the window, glass shattering around him. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him, but he didn't stop. He scrambled to his feet and took off down the alley, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the psycho's laughter following him, the sound echoing through the night like the cackle of a madman. His legs burned as he sprinted away from the house, the sound of his own breathing the only thing keeping him grounded. He didn't dare look back, fearing that the sight of the creature would paralyze him. His thoughts were a chaotic jumble, but one image remained clear in his mind: Steph's beautiful, haunting smile. What the fuck had just happened? As he rounded the corner, the alley opened up to the main street, and there, in the flickering streetlight, he saw Jose. The Therian was in the middle of some kind of bizarre workout routine, his muscles rippling as he moved through a series of complex contortions that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Quadrobics, Ryan recalled, the four-dimensional exercise craze that had swept through their town. It was said to enhance coordination and speed, and by the looks of it, Jose had mastered it. But as he approached, panting and disheveled, Jose's playful demeanor shifted to one of concern. He dropped to all fours, his eyes narrowing as he took in Ryan's panic-stricken expression. "What the fuck happened to you?" he growled, his voice low and animalistic. Ryan stumbled closer, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. "Steph, the house, it was him," he managed to choke out, his voice trembling. "The fuck?" Jose's eyes widened, his four-legged stance shifting to a more upright posture. "You went to meet her?" The concern in his voice was palpable, a low rumble of anger and protectiveness. Ryan nodded, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. "Yeah, but it wasn't her, man," he stuttered, his eyes searching Jose's for understanding. "It was him, the psycho from the woods. Keep running." Without another word, Jose grabbed his arm, his grip firm and reassuring. "Come on, I know a place." He led Ryan through the dark streets, his movement swift and silent despite his bulk. They arrived at an unassuming door tucked between two storefronts, one that Ryan had never noticed before. It was slightly ajar, and Jose pushed it open with a gentle nudge of his snout. Inside, a narrow staircase spiraled down into darkness. The scent of damp earth and mold filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile school hallways they had just left behind. Jose's eyes glowed faintly in the gloom, guiding them down the stairs. At the bottom, they found themselves in a hidden tunnel, the walls lined with cobwebs and the floor slick with moisture. The passage was low and tight, forcing them to hunch over as they moved deeper into the bowels of the city. The air grew colder, and the smell of the outside world faded away, replaced by the musty scent of long-forgotten secrets. Jose led the way with confidence, his nose to the ground as if he could see a map etched into the dirt. "Where are we going?" Ryan panted, his eyes darting around the claustrophobic space. "To the den," Jose replied, his voice low and urgent. "It's where we'll be safe." Their footsteps echoed through the tunnel, the only sound in the oppressive silence. The walls closed in around them, the air thick with the scent of decay and secrets long buried. The passage grew narrower, the ceiling lower, until Ryan had to crawl on his hands and knees. The floor was slick with something unidentifiable, and he didn't dare look down. The candlelight from the room above had been swallowed by the darkness, leaving them in a world of shadows. As they crawled deeper, a faint sound reached them, a distant wail that grew louder with each passing second. It was the town's emergency alert system, a shrill cry that pierced the air and sent a shiver down Ryan's spine. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's the PA," Jose panted, his grip on Ryan's arm tightening. "They're ordering an evacuation."